everyone, welcome to Handing the Shame Back, a show dedicated to the up to 1 in 3 adult survivors walking around our planet. On the show, and welcome, big warm welcome to the new subscribers among you. Thank you so much, and I hope that we can provide what you are looking for. This is a safe place, a place of community for all of those that have experienced child sexual abuse, and it's a humble attempt at bringing people together and having you feel less alone. Every week I bring you another amazing survivor from either within New Zealand or across the world. So I'm very grateful when people reach out and ask to be on the show, because there's such wisdom in what people bring to this, and you get to hear it. In the meantime, before I begin to introduce you to the wonderful guests coming up, I just need to issue a trigger warning, and that is, if you feel at all upset or concerned watching this video, please do switch off. Go to the show notes below. You'll be directed to some help and resource, and come back later if that feels safe. Please don't ever continue watching anything where you're feeling unsafe. All right, without further ado, ta-da! I have the wonderful Michaela Nance all the way from North Carolina with us today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. She is, in no particular order, a dog mum, a survivor, and a musician. So hang on to your hats. We're going to have a wonderful interview with her today, and I'm very grateful. And Michaela, how wonderful to have you with us. And I realise it's an evening over there, or moving into your nighttime.
It is.
Yes. So how are things for you over in, it'd be sunny North Carolina at the moment, I imagine?
Yes, very, very hot. Very hot.
I'm trying to have empathy for you, but really I'm just feeling a bit jealous. It's cold here.
It's too hot here.
Oh, let's meet and just swap. Let's meet in the middle.
Yes, please.
Okay, so look, as with all guests, and just whatever you're comfortable to share with us, you tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Sure. I was the youngest of 4 siblings. All 3 of my older siblings are boys. My mom and dad came from, unfortunately, very traumatic and abusive households. I grew up very strict, religious, Southern Baptist, and it definitely was not a very healthy environment for me and my brothers. And it turned out that eventually my oldest brother, who is about 5.5 years older than me, he turned out to be the one who sexually abused me when I was a child.
Okay.
And I guess a little bit more specifically about my childhood. My parents were very detached. It was very hard to go with them, to talk to them and trust them. And my brothers kind of did their own thing. And I was just very shy and quiet and the baby, and the only girl. So I had some, expectations of me that my brothers didn't have. So they could go out and do whatever they wanted to, but I had to stay in and, be protected because I was the only girl. And that was kind of hard to be, you know, growing up with people who could do what they want. And then I had to stay at home at all times and, didn't have many friends, etc. I'd say I don't know when the abuse started and I don't know when it ended. I just kind of remember the middle part of it. And the 2 memories of abuse that I have were in the summer where I turned 9 years old. And I remember my oldest brother sexually abusing me under a comforter while my other two brothers were in the room playing video games. And that was very hard because I remember looking at my brothers like, help me, something bad is about to happen, please help. And they were just like, I'm just going to play my video games, you know. And that was very hard for me to not only, you know, trust my oldest brother who was abusing me, but also to trust my other two brothers to, you know, to protect me. And the other instance of abuse, I remember having a massage train with my brothers, and the one who abused me would come behind me and touch me in other places besides, you know, massaging the shoulders. And he would force me to touch him back. And that's really the most that I remember of being abused. And I remember more of the output of it being how sad and unfortunately suicidal that I was, and how I just felt like I couldn't trust anyone, and just being alone and isolated and never just able to open up to anyone. And so it took maybe, I'm now in my early 30s, and I decided that because of some things that were happening in my early 30s, like some PTSD symptoms, some panic attacks, and just the way that I reacted to things and the fears that I had, like sleeping alone, being alone at night, things like that, that I decided that it was time to start digging all this up and dealing with it. So in the past 7 months, I have learned many, many things about my life that I don't remember. And it's been quite a journey, but some of the things that I was learning was from my cousins and my aunts and other people in my family who were kind of giving me little puzzle pieces of my life that I've been able to put back together. And it turns out that my cousin was also abused by my older brother. And she told me how it started. And how it started was that she came to spend the night with me. She's 2 years older than me. I was 8 and she was 10. And she remembers waking up in the middle of the night to my brother coming in my room. And she's like, oh, he's probably left something in here. And she just goes back to sleep. Well, she then wakes up to my brother being on top of me, abusing me. And we were sharing the same bed. So she obviously was like, you know, flabbergasted about what she saw. And she kicked him off of me. I don't remember any of this, but she said that she kicked him off of me, and then he fell off the bed and then got back on me and started again. And in, I guess, her trying to protect me, she was like, don't touch her. If you have to touch her, touch me instead. And that's how her abuse started. And she assumed that because he was touching her, that he stopped touching me, which was not the case. And so she became kind of my hero, but also I really hate that that had to happen to her. But she talked about her abuse, which I don't want to tell her story, but she talked about her abuse and when it ended. And if that was the case for me, when it ended for her, I would have been about 11 when it ended for me. If, you know, I could add some kind of parallels between our stories. And then I spoke with my aunt, who told me that she was also abused by her father. And apparently the day that I was born, she told my grandfather that if he ever touched me like he did her, that they would never find him again. And I didn't know that. And it also made me feel kind of loved that there were so many people behind the scenes that were helping me that I don't remember. And for someone who felt in their childhood that no one loved them, it really just changed my whole perspective on my childhood to know that there were so many people trying to help me. And I guess the last biggest thing that happened while discussing my childhood with my friends as a 32-year-old adult, I spoke with my childhood best friend, who was probably from kindergarten to 6th, 7th grade. And I asked her, I said, "I don't remember a lot of my abuse. Can you tell me if I told you anything about it?" And she said, "Of course." And she told me that my brother would lure me. I told her that my brother would lure me into the basement to perform oral on him. Something I don't remember, but she said for sure that that's the stories that I would tell her. And then she also told me that I actually did try to tell my mom and my dad about it, but my mom said, and she quoted me saying that my mom said that my brother wouldn't do that to me. And so I started therapy. I started going to do EMDR sessions, and I've come to at peace knowing that I might not know everything about what happened to my childhood, but I feel better knowing that there were people looking out for me that I didn't realize.
Wow, I'm just feeling into this. Thank you so much. You're so clear and eloquent, and I can imagine the trauma that lay underneath everything that you went through. And there's some interesting threads, Michaela, if I can go down those little paths with you. What struck me was that one of the things you said was, being the only girl, you were to be protected. So you were kept home to be kept protected and safe. And that's actually where the monster lived. So
Yeah.
I just, it did strike me that that was the case for you. I guess I wonder what kind of that might bring up for you. Just the fact that here you were almost trapped in a home, so you could be kept safe, and actually home was the last place you needed to be because you were not safe. What's your thinking?
It brings back a lot of other memories where my mom wouldn't let me go to school trips or to see certain friends. I remember there was a school trip where my chorus group got selected to go to Washington, D.C. to sing for the 9/11 memorial. And she said that I couldn't go because someone wasn't going to protect me and that I would be, taken away to be sex trafficked. And she would tell me that. I was like ninth grade when she said that. And I was like, I tried to tell you before about what was happening to me, and you didn't care then. Why do you care now? And then also so many times when I would be introduced to adults of my, friends of my parents, they would say, "Oh, you have 3 older brothers? I bet you feel so protected." And it was just like salt in the wound every single time. And I hated when people would tell me that I was safe because I had 3 older brothers.
Yes, and Michaela, 100%, and unfortunately, because you had one of the people tasked with protecting and caring for you, i.e. your mother, because she had decided he wouldn't do that to you, it begs the question, if one of her children is saying, yes, he would, why was there no other conversation around that? Why was there no investigation? And I guess what I'm wondering is, you talked at the beginning about the trauma or what your parents had been through, that had very traumatic childhoods themselves, and the detachment. I'm just
Mhm.
wondering if it was something potentially she herself had experienced, and that line, he wouldn't do that to you, is something, it's a learned line or something.
Mhm.
And what's your
Yes.
mm,
She definitely had, she told me when I was 18 that she was also sexually abused, by her cousin, And of course, her father was abusive, and her youngest sibling passed away in a tragic home accident. So she's had a lot of issues that she never has dealt with, at least professionally. And so I think she has this mindset of she was trying so hard to protect me that there was no way that she could fail. And so she was having such a hard time dealing with the fact that she did everything she could to protect me to an extreme, to a point where it was too much to only have the person who, she gave birth to be the one to hurt me. And I think her brain just couldn't handle that.
Yeah, and I also wonder if it was, as you alluded to, a little bit triggering for her, because to be honest, when you're a mother of more than one child, you don't just decide that one child is not telling the truth. So I guess I was just interested in how you were shut down so quickly and so easily, and it led me to consider whether or not that line, but he wouldn't do that to you, was almost a robotic response, no thought in it really. Is that how? Yeah.
It felt more like she was trying to make me believe that, because the the it almost seemed like she was angry with me for even bringing up that could happen. And my friend told me that I would cry to her sometimes because my mom stopped talking to me for a while afterwards. Like, she kind of silent gave me the silent treatment for maybe a month or two afterwards, which I could imagine for me being, that being very hard for like a 13, 14-year-old to go through. And I can imagine why my brain would try to force that out of, because I had to live every day in that house, seeing him and being with her and being with my dad, who just sat there quiet, like let her do her own thing. So I can imagine how hard that was, and I can completely understand why I forgot all that.
100%. And how brave were you trying to share that? And I want to acknowledge you, and for our beautiful survivor family watching, some of you will be nodding away, because what Michaela's very bravely shared is she did try, she did use the words, and she was immediately blocked and shut down. And for a lot of you beautiful ones watching, you've had a similar experience in terms of trying to tell your truth. So full credit and deep respect to you, Michaela, for that. Equally, but wait, there's more. You didn't just sit with this. You tried many, many, many times over those years, because you shared it. You shared it with your friends. You shared it with people you trusted. You told, or your cousin became aware of it. That then became a conversation over time. So I think what you did was really brave, and frankly, even though you kept getting knocked back and nothing would change, you kept trying to tell. And I think that shows the remarkable person that you are, because that would have been so hard to keep trying and not be acknowledged or believed. I am wondering what your cousin may have done with what she went through in terms of on your behalf. Are you aware if she told your auntie about what was happening to you?
She did. Was brought to my mom's attention because my cousin had a journal where she wrote in some of the things that were happening that my brother was doing to her. And her parents read it without her permission, and brought it to my mom. And my mom told them the exact same thing. She's like, she's lying. She would never do that. And my mom was so angry that she would cut my cousin out of family photos. Like, she was angry that she would ever say that. And she just started cropping her out of all the photos that she would put up on Facebook. And it made me very angry, but I wasn't, I still wasn't at a place where I could, properly defend myself. So I couldn't defend her.
No, no.
And yeah, and there were so many other times I remember going to my other aunt, my maternal aunt, and like another person was inside of me and I was crying and I gave her a hug and I said, he's a bad, bad man. But she never did anything. And I acted, I didn't have any friends in high school. I was very withdrawn. I remember going days without speaking. No one came up to me, no teachers, no administration, no one asked me what was wrong.
Yeah, and yeah, that unfortunately is not uncommon, even today. I think too, for our teachers, this is not an excuse, but I'm wondering with you whether they don't actually get the training to be able to recognize or to understand or to help. Now, that's not excusing that no one approached you out of simple humanity and kindness, but maybe there needs to be some training in these schools, high schools, so that teachers can actually have the tools to be able to approach.
Yeah, I think that, me graduating in the early high school and, mid 2000s, things are a lot more different now. They have to report anything that they hear. And, I think there's more training now than there was back then. So I think, childhood me was just in a bad time and there wasn't really a lot of people who were willing to talk about those kinds of things.
Yeah, and again, for our survivor family watching, they will completely relate to you, because for most of us, that was the case. Parents, teachers, other adults didn't notice, or if they did, chose not to act. And unfortunately, seems to be one of the hallmarks of child sexual abuse. People don't know necessarily what to do with it, so they do nothing. For instance, in New Zealand, it is not mandatory for people to report child sexual abuse. What is the story in the States?
There are certain professions like teachers who are mandatory. They have a number that they're supposed to call. So if anyone starts exhibiting any kind of, behaviors, or if they actually say something, they have to call that number to report it. And I think teachers, nurses, things like that, they're a part of those mandatory reporters.
Yeah. Yes, and as it flippin' well should be. So when you're thinking about your older brother, and I'm going to take you back to your younger brothers, and you were pleading with them through non-verbally, yeah? Pleading with them. So you couldn't use words because that would have alerted your older brother. But as you were pleading with your middle brothers to save you and rescue you, over that time, did they ever approach you? Were they ever kind of aware over those years that something was off with their lovely younger sister, do you think?
So the youngest brother is about a year older than me, and the middle of the brother, he's about 3 years older than me.
Yeah.
So I remember when I was 16, I told my middle brother about what happened, what Marshall did, and I just said that he touched me, and he seemed very encouraging. He's like, "Tell me if anything like that ever happens again. I'm going to go have a talk with, the other brother." But I don't think he ever did. And I think he was kind of, maybe he didn't really understood what he was going to do or what he was going to say or anything like that. But probably maybe March. No, it was April 1st of this year. I called my brothers in and their wives to my
Just
house,
the
and I
two of
had
them. Just the two of
just the two of them, not the
yeah.
older,
Not
not the older one.
not Marshall, no.
No, yeah. And I called them for a meeting and I said, this is going to be the worst April Fool's joke you've ever heard because it's true. Marshall sexually abused me. And I can only say maybe from ages 8 to 10, but I can't be sure because I don't remember everything. And if you need proof, here is the letter that my brother Marshall wrote me, and you can read it. And they all took turns reading it, and they all seemed very supportive, especially their wives, and who thanked me because they all have children, my nieces and nephew, and they're like, thank you for telling us. We're very happy to know this information. You're doing something very brave. So they seem to be very supportive, and but they still have this kind of weird middle ground between wanting to like understand the older brother. So they're kind of in a weird position. I admit that, but they, for the most part, seem supportive.
Yeah, it's interesting because the weird position you describe is you know, it's difficult for everyone, but the point is it happened to you, you gave them proof. I don't understand the weird position. There's no question. He's admitted it. He's written to you about it. He's admitting maybe a couple of years of it. You know there's more. He hasn't admitted yet. But the point is this, your brothers have the information. So whether or not they've been conditioned to never speak from maybe your mother or father, I don't know. What's your view on that? What do you think?
I think that because they don't know what it feels like to have been sexually abused, they don't, and because I was so good at keeping it under wraps and never showing, the suicidal parts of me or, other things like that, that they were like, oh, well, it probably did suck for her, but maybe Marshall feels bad now. Maybe he gets up in the middle of the night and cries about it. And I'm like, I cried about it for 20 years by myself, and, no one cared about me. So I don't understand their hesitancy, but I do acknowledge that they have, a weird position and that they need to figure that out for themselves.
They do, but in the meantime, how is it knowing that your other siblings do know, and that from what you're describing, their wives at least were supportive or do support you?
Mhm.
Yeah, how's that?
It feels good for them to know because I've kept it a secret and I felt like no one cared about what I had to say. So finally, to have someone who was there in that house finally know the truth and then to believe me is just it. I can't really describe how good that feels.
Yay.
Even if it's not, the extent that I would want it, it still
Yes.
is some validation, and it definitely helped. It's helping in my healing journey.
Oh, I'm so pleased to hear that. I'm just a little bit protective of you, Michaela. I'm just sitting here thinking, come on, people, stand up strongly. But, you know, people do the best they can with what they know, and I understand. And were you able to share the letter or tell me about your parents in response to the letter?
So I haven't, that's the last thing that I'm planning on doing is to confront my parents. I want to do it separately because my dad is more um reasonable, rational than my mother, and I definitely have more issues with my mom because of the things that she said and the fact that she was the one who verbally said that she didn't believe me and that she was the one who kept me locked in my little castle tower like like a princess. And so dealing with having to tell her is definitely a lot harder than my dad.
Yeah.
So that's going to be next, though, and my year long of figuring myself out and putting back together the puzzle.
And I suspect telling Dad first could be the best move.
I think so,
Yeah.
because he he has changed more now since I was a child. So he kind of puts his 2 cents in. He's not like the secondhand background parent. Like you know, he argues with my mom more, which is kind of a good sign because before then he was just kind of in the corner. So I think getting him alone and just rationally explaining the situation and the hurt that I've been through, I think will be a better to have him in my corner for when I do explain it to my mom.
I agree, because what do you think may happen if you approached your mum first? What do you think she might go home and then tell your dad? I guess.
Yeah, she would get so defensive and she would try to find anyone to pull into her corner to make her feel better about, the decisions that she made. So
Mm.
it wouldn't be a good idea to go to her first.
I think, and it's really powerful for you to even think about advising them, however you do that separately. I love your thinking about that, because I think that way it's one voice sharing your trauma as a child with one adult who was meant to protect and care for you. And I think that's really powerful. And look, it takes us years. It takes us, a long time to be able to find that courage. So something in you is feeling more ready for that, I suspect.
Yeah, I would say that the person who I am today has a hard time connecting with the kid and the teenager that I was, and that I feel kind of like a motherly influence over this inner child that I have. So it's like I want to protect her now. I want to be able to say the things that she never got to say.
Yeah.
And so now I'm just like, I need to do this for me, and I need to do this to heal this part of me that is inside.
That's so beautiful. And I was talking to a survivor the other day, actually, and he said, um, doing the work on the inner child, the best person to do that is me. And 100%, because you know what you went through, well, a lot of what you went through, the feelings that emerged and the prison you were in. So who best to nurture and honor and protect that little inner Michaela than you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about how your life is now. What are you working on? You're a musician. Tell us about that.
Um, so my life now is I'm kind of a housewife. My husband, he's a doctor. And so now that he's making enough money to support us after residency, that I can take this time to work on myself and do the things that, inner child really wanted to do to kind of make me happy. And part of that is, now I have the time to go through and dig all this stuff up. But then also now I have time to, I'm learning Japanese. I have a Japanese teacher online from Japan. And then I'm also taking singing lessons at the School of the Arts that's nearby. So I'm starting to feel like I'm more in control and I can do the things that I want to do now.
How does that feel?
It feels amazing to have control and freedom over your life because I never had that as a kid. My parents never gave me the chance to make my own decisions or to, even go to parties with friends, I was always inside that house.
And you know, interesting, isn't it? Because I imagine as the years went by, at what age could you leave? What age were you able to leave home and start your own life?
I think things really changed for me when I got to my senior year of high school and I got my first boyfriend. And I kind of, went to his house and kind of saw like the way that different families, interact. And I started having hope for my future. And I was like, oh, if I start doing well in school now, because before I didn't care, I was like, if I start doing well, maybe I can get into college and I can have more freedom and financial aid and stuff like that. So getting getting outside of the house was the best thing for me. And it really kind of helped heal this perception of the world that I had. And that, I would always be sad and alone and depressed. And that just wasn't true.
I'm so pleased you had that. What age were you? So, what age were you when you left home?
I want to say I was 19 when I got accepted into a college about 4.5 hours away from my house. And then I came back home temporarily for maybe a year. And then my parents were getting very controlling again. They turned off the internet so I couldn't do my homework and
Wow.
all this others. Yes, it was. I remember trying to apply for the FAFSA, which is, federal student aid, and we needed my parents' tax information. And they were like, well, it's somewhere in this pile. And they made me dig through like these piles of paperwork trying to find their tax information. And it's like they really had a hard time letting me go. But I think it was when I was probably 20 when I finally left the house and didn't come back.
Yeah. And how old was Marshall when he left home? Or how old were you when he left home?
I remember getting his letter when he was working. So I want to say he was maybe 2021 when he finally had enough money to leave
Okay.
because he didn't enjoy his house either. So we all had reasons not to enjoy being in that environment. But I think I was probably 16 when he
When he
left.
left. Yeah. Okay. Well, and so for you, what has helped you on your kind of recovery journey? I know we're always going to be in recovery, but what's helped you?
Definitely getting out of my comfort zone, experiencing new places, talking with new people, seeing how different families live their lives. And even if, they're problematic, just knowing that other people families have issues and how they deal with it. And not just getting out of those four walls of my bedroom. They used to call me hermit crab because I would be in my room 24/7 and I would never come out until it was dinner time and I go straight back in my room. And it was so funny because in middle school and high school, since all my brothers were older than me and they were doing athletic stuff and everyone knew them. And so when I came in to middle school and then eventually came into high school, people were like, oh, your last name is Nance. Are you related to these three? And I was like, yes. They're like, oh, you're their cousin? I'm like, no, I'm their sister. And they're like, we didn't know that they had sisters. Like no one knew that I existed because of how isolated and just quiet that I was. It was almost like I was invisible. So when I finally got out and got to college and made friends and just learned new things, it just really changed my perception.
It's thank heavens you're able to make up for some of that and
Mhm.
saw that way and saw that that is actually the gift of life, isn't it? Just being able to share that. Um, do you, as you're, we're moving into a closeout, is there any advice you would give to survivors that may have been in situations similar to you?
I would say there may be a couple things. One would be don't ever give up. I know how awful it was and how suicidal that I was, the times that I did attempt, and I'm so glad that I didn't. Things always have a chance of getting better and, just turning the next day, the next page, 'cause it's going to be totally different, and just don't ever give up. And I guess another would be you yourself and your happiness, your future is worth every difficult conversation you'll ever have, so don't be afraid to have them.
So you yourself and your future is worth every difficult conversation. Yeah.
Mhm.
I want to say as well, it's incredible to me to see you sitting here because you had all of your formative years and beyond uh, kept away, almost imprisoned, as you've said, princess in the tower, but cut off from, isolated uh, from life. And so, to me, this is not just child sexual abuse. What you underwent went way beyond that. And to see you sitting here today as this incredible young woman doing what you're doing, I'm really moved by you and your story, Michaela.
Thank you. I'm definitely trying, and I would say that even isolating myself during those years where you're learning how to be a person, it has affected me this day because I still have times where it's hard to connect with people and to talk and meet new people.
Yeah.
But it's something that you just got to continue working on because I didn't have a lot of those social skills when I was young.
Well, can I say you get an A+ from me because sitting here talking to you today, it's not apparent to me the level that you went through because of how far you've come. So I'm really blown away by you, and I'm just I really feel for what you went through, and I'm so glad that people now know that you exist.
Me too. Thank you.
So just stay there, Michaela. But audience, lots of things to think about, and sometimes with amazing survivors like Michaela, it goes hand in hand, doesn't it, with being isolated or being kept apart from others. And although with the best intent in the world, her parents may have believed they were protecting her, the reality was the protection didn't need to be keeping the world out. It needed to be looking at what was living within. So she said a couple of things that I think are quite powerful. One is, don't ever give up. She's so glad that she wasn't successful with the attempts to not be here. Don't ever give up, survivors. Look at the light sitting there in Michaela. And that you yourself and your future are worth every difficult conversation you will ever have about any of your abuse and story. So a big thank you to Michaela, and love and light to all of you. I see you, I stand beside you, and I believe you.